Good afternoon and welcome back all to our live stream. I hope everyone is enjoying the session so far today and feeling inspired from the discussions that have taken place. It's wonderful to see so many of you engaging online, posting your quests, using the chat function and using the app to expand your networks. Also, listening to the previous panel discussion, it's been wonderful to hear about the varied experiences and resilience of our sector. I'm delighted to be introducing our next live panel discussion on the topic of how are pharma deals evolving. So during this discussion, our expert panel are going to share their views on investment and deal-making trends for 2020, activity on the public markets, private investment in the different therapy areas and experiences of their own, and to comment on how 2021 may look. So with this, I'd now like to introduce Lucie Ellis, who is Executive Editor for In Vivo at Pharma Intelligence, and she'll be moderating our session today. So over to you, Lucie. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We've got a great lineup of people for this discussion. I'm really excited to see what they're going to talk to us about for how deal making is evolving. Just to start with, I'll go through a little bit of what a year it's been. Giving predictions at the end of each year for the coming months is always tricky. It's something we do every year and it's always iffy what you're going to go for. But I don't think anybody was able to predict what was going to happen in 2020 and the way that the sector has changed and the way the world has changed. Focusing in on deals and investments for 2020, I have a quick flavour for you of what we've seen. So according to data from Biomed Tracker, biopharma financing in this year, up until the end of November, totaled about $109 billion. The largest IPO round we saw was Royalty Pharma's listing on NASDAQ for $1.9 billion. Looking at M&A, Gilead had topped the table with the $21 billion acquisition of Immunomedics. There have been a number of deals in those sort of rankings, BMS acquiring Myocardia and Gilead again with its acquisition of 47. We've seen a lot of action there. Looking at partnering, the alliance with the greatest potential value is Daiichi Sankyo's agreement with AstraZeneca for antibody drug conjugates. That deals the potential value of $6 billion with the $1 billion upfront and the rest tied to regulatory and sales milestones. So a lot of action that we've seen all around. And also we've recognised over 140 COVID-19 related partnerships alone up until the end of November this year. So a real exciting, unusual, different year for biopharma. But now I'm going to get each of our panelists who we've got online with us today in this virtual setting to introduce themselves and also answer my first question for you, which is how have you had to adapt to get deal making or investment done in 2020? So what's been different for you if you've got a good example as you introduce yourselves? So perhaps Michael, you could start us off.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here with you today. My name is Michael Crowley. I'm head of business development for Roche, research and early development based in Basel, Switzerland. I guess actually, in terms of adapting, we've had to adapt just like everyone else to the virtual format. It seems so long ago that we were questioning, could we work this way, and what would it be like to actually not be across the table from someone during a negotiation? How was it going to slow us down? But I think we quickly learned as the pace continued to be very busy in 2020 that we could work this way and actually even perhaps more efficiently. So I think now we're fully adapted to working in this virtual manner.
Great, thanks, Michael. Jeremy, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeremy Carmichael. I'm SVP of Corporate Development at Astea. Astea is a biotech company based in Cambridge, and we're part of the Otsuka group of companies. So we have also experienced the roller coaster that has been 2020, and it has changed, obviously, the way we work. We've all got used to working from home. Luckily, within the pharma sector, many of us can argue that we still need to have our scientists in labs doing work. And so many of us who can work from home have been working from home, but largely our scientists have still been involved in progressing projects. And in terms of deals, for Astex, actually, we signed a big deal at the start of the year with Merck, and that's really been the focus of our attention this year. So rather than look at new big deals, we've been trying to actually bed in that collaboration. And I agree with what Michael said in terms of just adapting to a new way of working. You know, we managed to squeeze in a kickoff meeting with our new collaborators, and that was a face-to-face meeting back in January, and then the world very quickly changed. So all of our subsequent meetings have been, you know, virtual Zoom calls, Blue Jeans calls. But actually, we've gotten used to that, and in a way, we've sort of become a little bit more human, a little bit less formal. You know, I find that actually that way of working is quite good. It would be interesting to hear others' thoughts on how it's changed deal negotiation. But for us, you know, we're still able to have lots of those conversations. So it hasn't really impacted us too negatively. The other thing that's happened to us greatly over the last year is the amount of outsourcing that we've done. So again, our scientists are struggling to try and keep projects going. So we've done an awful lot more deals with groups that were operational during COVID that could help us move our projects forward. And maybe that's another thing that other people have seen. But I definitely think that working from home hasn't made it any less busy. In fact, we've been working 24/7 around the clock, it seems, since March. And I get that from a lot of my colleagues. So I think for people like us in the service side of the business, you know, looking to put deals together, we've been incredibly busy all year. And that's a good thing. You know, we're very fortunate.
Yes, I think we've seen the same. I don't think we've ever been busier. Teresa.
Hi, thank you. I'm Teresa Lavoie. I'm a principal at the law firm of Fish & Richardson, which is an intellectual property boutique based in the United States, but we also have an office in Munich and Shenzhen, China. So I'm in the service side of typically doing diligence on these deals on the IP portfolios, either looking to the buy or sell side, you know, as my client. And I think I will echo what Michael and Jeremy have said in that this process of working from home and doing Zoom calls allows you to be more efficient and pack more into a day. So whereas you might have had to travel before and, you know, you got the day of travel and the actual event and then the day and if you multiply that by the number of people involved, right, it really slowed things down. But we're seeing that because there's that, you know, people can just do things now much more rapidly that, you know, it'll be, we're doing this deal and can you be on a call tomorrow sort of thing. Just really efficient, rapid things. Perhaps foreshadowing a bit what you're going to talk about later in terms of the types of deals that are being done, the size of the deals that are being done. We're seeing a lot more diligence done on my clients that are preclinical clients. And some of the changes are having to educate the investors, some of whom are traditional biotech investors, some of whom are not traditional biotech investors, sort of on a preclinical patent portfolio, as well as, you know, technically and scientifically that portfolio, understanding what that means for these investors that, you know, aren't typically involved in biotech investing or aren't used to looking at a portfolio where you don't have anything that covers a drug candidate because the drug candidate isn't there yet, right? They're still doing their research and development to get to that stage. So I think just education there really has been something that we've had to focus on, and just much more rapid movement. I've basically been telling my team, you know, biotech's been booming for a number of years now, but we should be in an always diligence mindset, essentially, that you never know when you could get the call saying we're in diligence with someone, we need, you know, our data room updated, schedule of IP, have you on a call with their outside counsel. So that's, you know, a trend that I've seen, you know, over the past few years, but it's rapidly accelerated this year.
I think some of the trends that we've all been following over the last couple of years have really picked up in 2020, and it's sort of been make or break for some of them. Roel.
Yeah, thanks, Lucie, and hi, everyone. So my name is Roel Bulthuis. I'm a managing partner at Zinkev Capital. We're a mixed tech and healthcare fund, invest primarily in Europe, selectively in the US, currently investing from a 500 million euro fund. So it's nice to be part of this discussion, although I feel slightly the odd one out as an investor in here. The question, Lucie, is interesting. So I would say that it's been interesting to see how resilient our sector is during this year. It's been super interesting to see that. I think as some of the others have already mentioned, the volume of deals, the number of deals that we've seen, both in terms of financing, but also BT and M&A. I don't think we've seen any significant slowdown. If anything, it's been on the increase. And we can talk about sort of what that is driven by maybe a little bit later. But I also think that given the opportunity, we've shown that we can be slightly better as an industry at explaining what drives us. And I think that's been one of the major opportunities for us as a pharma and biotech sector this year, now that I guess the general public also see what the dependence is on what we do as a sector. I think many of us have been involved in and have improved the way that we explain what we do as a sector. On our side, I guess on a more operational level, we had decided that 2020 would be a year where we would accelerate our investment pace. We were seeing, and we did that last year to some extent already, but this year certainly we were seeing so many opportunities that were sweet spot for us on the financing side, that we really wanted to make sure that both in terms of making new investments, but also accelerating the development of our portfolio and accessing venture money and capital markets, that we would do that. And that is, and there I would just echo what the others have said. It's been really great to see how we've all become better at deciding what resources to use when, but we've all been able to progress those deals. So the ambitions that we had for this year, I think we've been able to make most of those come true. So I'm quite happy with how we as a firm, but also to look around as a sector, how we've really sort of made quite a challenging year for everyone into an opportunity for the sector.
I think that's a really interesting point, that resilience that we've seen. I'm not sure everyone expected right at the start. And actually to the progress that we've seen has been remarkable from some areas of the industry. Finally, Niharika, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Lucie. Hi, everyone. My name is Niharika. I'm an associate within the investments team. So I'm also based not very far from Michael in Basel. Of course, we've adapted to the situation, the biggest change being that even though Basel had resisted for a very long time not to work from home, but I think we've all succumbed to working from home. As all the panelists have said, I think the virtual setting for us actually was not new. So just Roivant, as the way it's set up, we have a large chunk of our partners sitting in New York. So we're very used to having Zoom calls almost at any time of the day. So this is something that has not changed for us. In terms of other aspects of adaptation and deal making, we found it very efficient actually to work virtually. I think initially there were a little bit of hiccups when it came to finding partners who had some operational difficulties sort of going virtual, but now we find that almohad every potential partner we speak to have completely aced this sort of virtual setup. Roivant has had a fairly successful year. We have closed 2 fairly large collaborations that we have announced in the last 2 months, and one very recently earlier this week. And so we have found that it's been very, not without challenges, but it has been a great year to collaborate, and the openness to collaborate has been really something to learn from and to polish.
Great, thank you everyone for that introduction and some of the points you've made around virtual and sort of the rapid decision making, more outsourcing. From these trends and changes that we've seen of how everybody's had to adapt in 2020, which of those do you think are going to stick when borders open, when travel comes back? Which of these kind of adaptations that you've done do you think are going to remain? Who wants to jump in first for that one? Jeremy.
So I'll say I think that the whole remote working has probably created a trend that everyone is now so used to that I don't think that in itself will go away. Niharika said that it was sort of usual for her, and I suppose to some extent it's usual for all of us to have calls and have not to meet people in person. But I think going forward, we'll continue to look at the benefits of that. And I've heard a lot of discussion about, for example, how the COVID-19 situation had forced companies to look at remotely operating their clinical development, having remote recruitment of patients onto trials, having remote monitoring of patients who didn't want to come into clinic and wanted to receive medicines at home. So I think that a lot of companies will actually look to see, what are the advantages of having been in that difficult situation, and actually the impact on some of those things, to the extent that you can run trials more cheaply in a more cost-effective way, doing these some of these operations remotely, I think is bound to make a difference to the way pharma companies continue to move forward, and they will adapt and adopt some of those changes, I think.
Definitely. Any other thoughts on that, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that. I think, we probably look quite seriously at what we've learned about the importance of travel and face-to-face. I mean, I don't think there's any substitute, especially if you're trying to initially build the relationship for a face-to-face type of meeting. But I mean, one of the things that Roche prides itself on is its commitment to sustainability, and to be able to do the work as effectively as we've done it this year, and to get, basically, we're going to end up signing as many deals in 2020 as we did in 2019. And that on top of all of the contribution to, the fight against COVID-19 in terms of the diagnostics that Roche has developed, deals that we've done with Astea and Regeneron to help bring therapeutics to market. And if we can do that much virtually, and travel has a climate sort of consideration, et cetera, and there's a cost associated with it too, not just explicitly, but also to just the wear and tear on the people that are traveling. And we've basically worked around jet lag, for example, during this period of time. So I really think you're going to see changes in how we use travel, and being much more sort of thoughtful about when you do and when you don't.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think JP Morgan next month will be a real test to see how that works virtually. Probably Teresa, yeah. Sure.
I was going to echo Michael's comments about sustainability, that I've seen that with a number of clients and organizations. The patent offices, have all had to work from home, and they have thousands of examiners, and they're looking forward to, continuing having this instead of, live face-to-face interviews, for example. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that it's worked so well, and the sustainability efforts of those organizations. I also think, hopefully comes out of this is the resilience that Roel mentioned, but also innovative ways to reach out and meet new people. I think a lot of us have relied on our networks, but also connecting with other people through events like this, to continue that process of, you can't meet, bump into someone getting coffee at a conference like this anymore. So how do you try to replicate that for the whole community? And people, I think, have really stepped up this year to try to do that, participating in these types of events, but also trying to connect so that, the growth and the momentum that we had coming into 2020 from earlier years, will continue as we go into 2021, 2022, that this wasn't a period of just sort of finishing out all those deals that were in the making, but new deals coming on as well.
Great, thank you. That's a good point. Thinking about some of the stats that I gave you at the start, and particularly looking at IPOs and the surge we've seen there in the midst of a pandemic as well, is it a case of sort of biotech, biopharma being a safe haven? Do you think this is going to drop away in 2021? What are your sort of thoughts around that? Roel.
Lucie, I think there's a lot of excitement in the market this year, and maybe that will not be there forever. Although I do think that fundamentally, We're looking at a class of companies that goes through an IPO right now that has substantial assets that underlie the equity stories that go into the market. With all the money that's going in there and the valuations that are getting paid right now, that could probably slow down slightly. But I don't see that we have a bubble here right now where we're overvaluing assets that are not relevant. And I think the interesting thing also for this discussion, it's not just in the IPO market, it's also in the venture markets, if you will. So there's a lot of money available for companies that list on an exchange, especially in the US. There's also a lot of money available for companies that want to raise venture financing. I mean, you've seen that at all levels and in all geographies, venture firms have been raising increasing funds that have been increasing in size. The cycles have shortened between fundraising. And that also, the only way to maintain that is if these funds get deployed relatively quickly. So you really see a very strong market where if you have the right asset, if you're in a good competitive space, as an entrepreneur, as a team, you have access to significant venture financing, and the investors in your company can see a realistic chance of listing their company on an exchange. Again, if that is always going to be sustainable at these levels, I don't know. But it's not a cycle that will quickly end. So if you see venture firms, they have a 10-year cycle with a 6-year investment period, probably in the current market try to deploy in 3 to 4 years. That means that the funds that are raised today, so I mean, even this week, we saw another amazing announcement by one of our Dutch firms, Forbion, raising close to 500 million for their new fund. That money is not just going to go away. That money needs to get deployed. So fundamentally, we're in a strong position as a sector to do that. And I'd love to hear the pharma perspective on that as well. It puts biotech companies in a position of strength when it comes to when do I do a partnership? Because if I have access to financing at the venture stage, but also in public markets, I'm in a much better position to have control of destiny. When do I feel that I want to have a discussion with a potential partner acquirer? When do they start to add value to my story? It's a really interesting time to be in that market right now.
Yeah, I think Michael probably has some thoughts on that from conversations we've had before about biotechs and partnering and sort of the necessities not always immediately there for them now like it used to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, for us, you know, these discussions between Roche and the life sciences community are really like are critical to our R&D strategy. I mean, we have a pipeline that's basically 50% you know, partnered molecules, and you know, about 40% of our sales come from partnered molecules. So it's a big contributor, and year in, year out, we're active in the deal space. And I think one of the things that I think makes Roche a compelling partner is the fact that we, you know, not only bring the science kind of that complements the biotech opportunity, but we've also been over the last, you know, 5 years or so willing to do deals where we want to actually take advantage of the culture of the biotech and have them take the lead. We don't want to necessarily insert ourselves. We want to be thoughtful around, even for very early stage deals, occasionally sharing the product rights. But what we're finding actually is that with the opportunity or the options that biotech has, the types of deals that I think we're just starting to see now are narrowing in the scope that actually biotechs want to do, and they're increasing in the price. And you know, I think it's hard for folks like me that have been doing deals for many years, and we're so busy in year out, but it's eventually you get to a point where you can't make that deal make sense to yourself, you know. And I feel like we don't want to miss the boat on interesting science, but we also don't want to do a deal that's not compelling enough, you know, from a scope of rights perspective in particular, you know, not even so much the financial, but how are we participating? I mean, one of the, just to add a couple more points to that, to give you an idea of what we do like right now. The two deals that we did this year with Arrakis and Vividion were actually quite big scope deals where there were many targets involved. With Arrakis, we're the sole partner in targeting RNA. And what we like about these types of deals is that we're able to feed the insights from the collaboration back into the collaboration and really sort of reap the benefits across many different targets. As the scope starts to narrow, we start to feel like the way we're collaborating gets to be a little less interesting. And maybe we start to focus even back again more inward. So it's an interesting time, and the dynamic is really interesting.
Yes, Jeremy.
So I was getting excited there and my camera moved, so apologies for that. I think that another reason why we would reflect on maybe why the deals are different is because of that, the availability of finance in the market. So I think, if we compare, I'm thinking about the history of Astex back in the day, trying to IPO in 2007 sort of time frame, and the markets particularly in Europe, were not very receptive to biotech IPOs. And I think that, we see a real shift now in terms of the valuations that some small biotechs can achieve, even when they've got, early stage products. And I think that's a reflection on the fact that the investor base is more supportive of biotech in general. And we've seen that, over the past year as well, in terms of, I think, a lot of focus on, the way we've done good science, the way we've moved the vaccine development forward rapidly. People believe in the sector, and actually the alternatives of finding investments in other sectors are less so, because those sectors have been hit much more by the situation that we find ourselves in. So I think that in the past, when it's been difficult to raise decent amounts of funding, you did have a situation where biotechs couldn't be their own boss. They had to go out and find partnerships or do collaborations or sign deals maybe a little bit earlier than they would have liked to. And I think that's probably a change that we see. You can raise more significant amounts of capital now, so you can actually do more and build more value yourself without having to look for partnerships. So maybe that's part of the equation as well, and part of why there's maybe a slight push for the biotechs to have deals that make more sense to them rather than to the pharma partner that find those deal values maybe a little bit too much or not broad enough in scope. So.
Great, thank you. Teresa, what kind of changes are you seeing around that? You mentioned obviously a bit more of a focus on earlier stage companies, but what are the sort of changes are you seeing in the way smaller companies are interacting with larger companies?
I think I can echo what Michael said, and Jeremy and Roel, is that they just have a lot more opportunities now, right? And they are very careful about thinking about the pressures that they're going to get from whatever investor opportunity that they're looking at, whether it's thinking about going public and the pressures that might put on them in terms of when they have to have a product, in the IND for the market, that sort of type of approach, but then for particular VC funds, that, what pressures might be coming from there, or if they want to partner, right? So I think they have more opportunity and trying to educate themselves on, what would be the best path for them. But they have that opportunity now. I think Jeremy was pointing, in the past, maybe you didn't have that, right? So you needed to partner earlier. And I think now there's just more opportunities for really strategically thinking, what do we want to be 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and who do we want to partner with, and what are our, the best opportunities for us? So that's what I'm seeing on my side with my clients, and most of whom are very early preclinical, or maybe have one product in the clinic at this point.
Great, thank you. And Niharika, I think Roivant's always had a slightly different strategy way it partners. What are you seeing around these changes?
Yeah, this is what I was thinking. So Roivant sort of sits in the middle. It has a hybrid model, which is not really traditional biopharma and not really traditional VC. But we don't have internal R&D, so we are reliant on internalizing external innovation. At least we were up until this month. So for us, it's very important to find biotechs with assets that they are willing to out-license or willing for us to acquire. This was sort of a big part of our bread and butter up until now. Roivant has historically, I think, done very sort of streamlined in licensing or asset acquisitions. But now, as Michael was saying, I think deals are becoming so much more sophisticated, and there is a lot of option that we can provide to smaller biotechs. We can not only license, but we can also get into long-term research collaborations with sort of little multi-target collaborations with option fees built into the agreements. And this is what we've started to look at now. So I think in terms of biotechs having options and sort of traditional VC/public funding routes, of course, these are available. But if they're looking for partners that can bring in some sort of advanced understanding on how to, develop a certain asset in a creative, innovative way, then I think we provide that kind of sort of partnership in that sense.
Great, thank you. I think sort of mentioned there a couple of times is the broader scope of some of these deals that we're seeing now. And it's a conversation we've been having in-house. When everybody's looking for these sort of pipeline and a product opportunities, does that mean that some of the low-hanging fruit that could still be profitable, that doesn't fit that kind of model, is sort of left on the tree? What are your thoughts on that? I'm going to pick on Roll, he's nodding.
I was trying to signal that I'm still thinking about it, but it's okay. I'm not so sure. I mean, as an investor, Lucie, it's nice to look at trends, and to be honest, I think that research is useful to see where the industry is going. But trends for me is looking backwards. I want to sort of think about my portfolio companies and the way that we do deals based on a forward-looking nature. And I'm not sure if I want them to fit into a trend or a basket that someone else defines for me. Sometimes I have molecules that are going to be relevant to develop in several indications, and I can find a way to see the commercial model around that. And sometimes I will want to see that there is some sort of chemical differentiation between the molecules that I develop based on the same scaffold for an indication. It really needs to be driven by the asset where we go with these companies. And I don't believe that there is a lot of low-hanging fruits in the market right now. I think everyone is taking advantage of the resources that are available in the market to optimize their product portfolios. And I actually think, and maybe that's something that also feeds back into the discussion that we had before this, is that pharma also recognizes that that opportunity is there. So if you think about the way that we've been working with pharma, and I used to run a corporate venture fund where I was directly involved in some of these things, the way we've been working with pharma historically around sort of spinning out assets, financing those assets, and kind of taking those assets into an environment where they would become successful. I have the impression, but I'm also interested how others think about that. I have the impression that pharma sees the opportunity right now of what is available in the market in terms of financing, and is much more active on that, and sees the value of that can create as well. I mean, we've done 2 new investments this year in partnership with pharma in a nice deal. I think, Michael, you announced a nice deal earlier this week with Sofinova and Polaris. It feels like a really nice model right now also to look at that direction. There's so many things that are on the shelf in pharma that could actually have value, but that don't survive the large portfolios that we have there, where I think as a venture community, as a startup community, we can add a tremendous amount of value.
Yeah, that's.
I appreciate Roel mentioning that, actually. Yeah, that was a cool deal with Noema. We founded a company with our former head of neuroscience to take forward 4 assets that had been deprioritized, but still we believe have benefit for patients. And so these types of discussions and out partnering in general is a part of what we do. And it won't take over in partnering, but it remains an important part.
Great, thank you. Jeremy, I think you had some thoughts on this question as well.
Well, I was just going to comment that I think that, the competition is so fierce in the marketplace that I'm not sure that there is much low-hanging fruit, because there's always going to be someone who's looking for an opportunity to move that forward, and provided that the deal terms are right, that's usually going to result in some sort of a collaboration to actually do that. Reflecting on some of the other points, I think in the past we've had a difficulty of getting pharma to prioritize looking at things that they have put on the back burner and finding other ways of moving those forward. And that's always been difficult for people on the outside then who aren't aware of what the assets are. And I think that probably is changing a bit, or at least it's good to see that it's changing a bit, because there's no sense in having things that do have a potential not to be moved forward, and to find ways to make those available. So that's a good trend if others are seeing that. I think that's a welcome thing.
Do you think that might be slightly driven on some of the technologies that are available now that are able to identify stuff that maybe you didn't realize would fit into a certain area, some of the AI technologies that we're seeing being used in discovery or in early stages?
Are you asking me or others?
Anyone can jump in. You can go first, Jeremy.
So I think, as technology develops, it does allow us to look at things differently. And I think that there has been a bit of that. I also think that, you have some companies that look at specifically repurposing, and that's their unique selling point. So they're actually going out to try and find ways to identify new potential uses for existing compounds. So I think it's a mix of those, but certainly technology development continues to change the landscape of what we do. And we'll probably touch on that a little bit more as well in terms of what we see for the future, because, the technology never stands still. And that continually gives us new opportunities to expand the base.
Lucie, one other thing that might be worth mentioning too about the conditions for out partnering is really finding, it's one thing to have the asset on the shelf, it's another to have the right set of hands to take it on that gives it a sufficient chance to being successful. So I think it's we have to find that matching up. It's not just about money, it's about expertise and sort of a vision that we share.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts on that before I move you on? No. Looking ahead, Jeremy, like you just mentioned, thinking about going into the next year, what are you guys looking at in terms of therapeutic areas or technology areas? What is it that you're keeping an eye on? Is there anything that we're expecting might be different as we go into 2021, particularly maybe anti-infectives or anything that we've seen after this year that might come back? Or are we all thinking it'd still be oncology or be top of the table?
Well, I think for us, oncology and CNS are the two areas that we've focused on, and they both continue to have their challenges. But I can think about Astex in particular, and then I can think about what's going to happen in the industry in general. I think that now that we are really in the internet age, we've seen a huge influx of other types of businesses interested in healthcare. The Googles and the Amazons of this world, and I think that that's something to watch. How we will see, all of that play on delivery of healthcare. The commoditization of healthcare as a product, and you can order your GP and you can send your blood samples in and you can do all of that. So I think that that's a huge change that we're going to see going forward. I think for small companies like Astex, and for each of us, we have to make sure that it's not really the strong that survive, it's the people that can adapt to change that will survive. So we all have to continue to keep on our toes and make sure that we embrace technology development to make sure that we actually keep competitive. Astex does that through having some focus on, we have a program that looks at recruiting postdocs into the business who actually work on technology development projects to keep us sort of at the cutting edge. And we have that in sort of areas like cryo-EM, AI, biomarker development, bioinformatics development. So all of those trends in looking at how data can support better informed decisions about what to focus on. All of those things I think are important and will be a function of an increasing focus, if you like, going forward.
Great, thank you. Other thoughts then on technology areas? We'll go Niharika and then to Teresa.
Sure.
Yeah, I was just thinking about sort of as we learn about long COVID and as we understand the long-term implications of patients who've potentially been cured of COVID, I think there is going to be a pivot from CNS and oncology and immunology to more sort of respiratory infectious diseases, and more technology sort of emerging there, new modalities being tested in areas that were undervalued for some time now.
Teresa, I think you had something to add as well.
Yeah, just the deals that we've seen this year on early cancer detection with Illumina sort of reacquiring GRAIL and Exact and Thrive earlier detection in the United States. So sort of pushing biomarker development and analytics of data to sort of get that earlier prediction, ultimately with the goal of trying to, not need therapeutics anymore, right? To be able to monitor or, address the cancer at an extremely early stage. So I think that's one trend. Jeremy mentioned that, the Googles and the Amazons, the data, big tech data companies, sort of commoditizing healthcare. And I think, if you see what DeepMind has done, in protein folding, using those type of techniques to, be a part of an overall drug discovery platform, and just the rapid acceleration of that type of aspect of drug discovery, as well as the AI and ML sort of screening approaches that I think will really accelerate getting to some good drug candidates.
Great, thank you. Roll.
Yeah, I'm going to make a super boring comment probably. This has been a year with a lot of change, and it's going to take a lot of time for all of us to sort of resettle and get back to whatever is going to be normal. But apart from the fact that there's going to be some additional attention to COVID and maybe infectious diseases, our overall healthcare system hasn't changed fundamentally. Yeah? So if you think about where pharma primarily and large biotech companies are looking in terms of their commercial mandate, that's not subject to major changes right now. So I think when you and as an investor, we are therapeutic area agnostic. We really look at opportunities in a sense that can we see the translation of fundamentally often super cool science, but can we see the translation to something that is clinically, commercially relevant? That's the only way for us to see that we can have a relevant discussion with pharma partners, with pharma acquirers over time. And in that sense, we need to keep a balance in the portfolio. And what's been interesting in 2020 already, and I think to some extent in 19, is that we've seen, from my perspective, healthy rebalancing from everything needs to be oncology or immuno-oncology, with a little step in between that everything needs to be fibrosis, to there's also other therapeutic areas that we need to be investing in. In my firm, we've made new oncology investments during this year, and we're super excited by some of our portfolio companies that work in the oncology space, but we've made investments in the cardiovascular space, in the metabolic space, in the CNS space this year. And there is a lot of attention from investors to those fields. So I think, yes, we're going to see new therapeutic modalities. We're going to see new technology platforms that feed into that. We're seeing some super interesting developments in the fields of protein-protein interactions right now in terms of technology that comes to maturation. They've obviously been around for the last years, but they're really getting to a point where we're starting to see the approach to work out. But in the end, they need to fit into a target product profile that makes sense for a doctor, that makes sense for a regulator, and makes sense for a payer, for us to make an investment decision.
But I do think pricing is going to be maybe something that will change maybe not immediately, but I do think that there will be some pressure on the public perception that we've done a great job in developing vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. That's fantastic news for the sector. We're making them available at no cost or at sort of not for profit. People will see the value of medicine, but they may not see it in terms of financial value. And I think that, if you look at some of the medicines that are being developed, particularly in the cell therapy space or the gene therapy space, where those prices are maybe much higher, I predict that there will be some resistance to that. I mean, I don't know if others have comments, but that's sort of my view, that as long as people feel that there's value for money, then that will become an increasing consideration in terms of drug pricing.
Yeah, that's a good point. And how much are you guys thinking about that when you're considering the deals you're making as well, then, that this pricing aspect may be stronger, maybe under more scrutiny after this year? Michael, I think you had some thoughts.
On Teresa's comment about digital and data, and I'll just do that because I think that's so important to us in terms of enabling personalized health. That as an area, it's not so much a trend. It's an ongoing trend that we will keep a close eye on data, and we'll be very active in the digital space. I mean, regarding pricing, we're very aware of the importance of being in a discussion around price, and for us, value for the patient is a top consideration. It's what drives what we do, and access to the drugs and enabling access is also something that's very important to us. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We have one question coming from our audience, which is, what do you as the panel think about the Asia market at the moment? A lot of investment was coming from the Chinese market before 2020. Do you see this continuing? How might this change after the year that we've had? Michael.
Yeah, I mean, actually, so Roche is really committed to being active in China. We have an R&D facility there that has been part of the Basel-based R&D group, and we think that it is just a really interesting place where we're seeing more and more, or we're seeing the emergence of first-in-class, best-in-class innovation. And we expect to see more of that. So it's something we'll be looking at closely. We have partnering teams. We're a global partnering group. We have partnering colleagues in Japan and in China. And I believe we've announced our new Asia head who'll be starting in and will be based in Shanghai starting in January. So, we're going to be active in China for sure.
Great. And Niharika, perhaps Roivant's activities in Asia, you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah, well, Roivant has an Asian subsidiary. It's called Sinovant. But actually, I would like to highlight a recent deal. So the protein degrader platform that we just announced, we acquired a spin-out from the University of Michigan as a part of this deal. But we also have partnered with a Korean firm. So this is the strategic investment arm of SK Holdings. And they are not typically, traditional biotech or healthcare investors. And this is a big signal that there is, China and Asia is emerging as a strong market, and I think even more post-COVID. And there are opportunities for biopharmas or biotechs based outside the territories to partner and tap into actually some of the investor base in Asia. And we've learned this from the successful deal that we've just closed. So I'd just like to highlight that.
Yeah, I think that's a great example and a nice recent example that we can talk about there. Other thoughts on the Asia market and what you're seeing?
I mean, for me as a patent attorney working with typically biotech startups and emerging companies, it's critical and it's expensive for them, but early on, they have to have a global portfolio and figure out how they're going to have their exclusivity, whether that's through patents, some sort of orphan or other, the regulatory regime in a particular country, either for someone, like Roche, who's going to take over the whole portfolio and potentially commercialize everywhere, or if they're going to sub-partner to Asia to one particular partner, another one. So I think there's a level of sort of understanding and sophistication now that, they can't just have a US or European portfolio. They need to think globally and approach thinking about their loss of exclusivity, whether that's coming from regulatory or patents in, sort of cross-jurisdictional, to make sure that portfolio or their loss of exclusivity story that they can tell ultimate partners with makes sense for the product.
Great, thank you. Another question for you all. When you're considering the deal making you're doing and the strategies that you have in mind, how important is lifecycle management when you're weighing up an opportunity? Perhaps back to Teresa again on that one.
I'd say, that's when I have clients that are in diligence, typically with big pharma for, an exit, acquisition. I've had a few of the clients acquired over the past few years. That's almost question number one when we're in very active diligence, right? It's making sure the portfolio covers the drug, but really what's that loss of exclusivity date? What was the strategy sort of early on to try to maximize that, and thinking sort of multi-jurisdictionally, right? What is it in Europe? What is it in the US? What is it in China? And looking at that and really digging into that strategy. So I think it's hugely important to consider from the very beginning as you're developing the IP around your portfolio and figuring out the regulatory path and how those exclusivities sort of dovetail together.
Any other thoughts on lifecycle management? Roll.
Yeah, I was trying to get off mute. I agree with Teresa that we have to sort of keep the IP portfolio around our molecules in good shape, and we have to have the right narrative around that. There is a sort of flip side to this discussion, in my experience, in discussions about sort of the value of an asset with a potential pharma acquirer, also having been on the other side of that discussion. And that is, if I have an asset that has a meaningful patent life, even if I can project or predict exclusivity on that basis, I will also take into account that while the market develops and while science develops, even if I have exclusivity for that specific situation, there's going to be competing products in the market. So the tail end of that model is not always as meaningful as we think. So yes, it's an important consideration, but I wouldn't advise my portfolio companies to start thinking about kind of life cycle extension or life cycle management approaches at the stage where we're offering an asset that has, again, a meaningful expected market exclusivity. That's going to define the bulk of the value of the asset in my discussions.
Great, thank you. We've got a few minutes left now, so I want to give you all time to do a little summary sentence each. If you're thinking about 2021, your biggest concerns in your different locations, your different roles, but also the hopes that you have for the coming year. So something you're targeting or aiming for 2021. So if we just run round, if we start with Niharika first, and what you're expecting next year.
Well, I think the biggest concern would be mostly long-term implications of COVID. I think this is really on my mind. I am one that is really looking to understand what long COVID really means, like I had already mentioned. In general, the world economy, I mean, we sort of, as you know, within the biopharma, we, I think, often are privileged, and I'm very grateful that it's been such a great year for the sector, but there are other sectors that have been majorly impacted. And I, for one, I have a family that stays in India, so I'm really looking to see what are the implications on tourism and travel and airlines, so sectors outside ours. And I think in general, just to sum it up, this hope is that, you know, we have been, as people in the pharmaceutical industry, I think we've come together splendidly. We have been very united. And I think we've raised the expectation with this sort of the rapidness of getting vaccines all the way from discovery to approval in 10 months. So I just hope we can live up to it.
Great, thank you. Jeremy?
Yeah, I would agree with all of those sentiments. I think that, you know, we've had a crazy year, but I'm not sure that next year is going to find us all back to normal. I think it's going to take a while before that happens. And we've talked about ways in which we can adopt what we've learned and actually, you know, continue to use some of those ways going forward. I think that again, the challenge will be to see the fallout from all of this and how it actually impacts what we have to do to fix some of the other sectors that are going to be less fortunate than ourselves. Some people who are out of work and we need to find ways to address that. And also, it's sort of payback time for us all, and that will hit us all in different ways. But in terms of, you know, us as a company, I do continue to see the fantastic nature of working in this sector, which is, you know, the constant innovation, the constant opportunities that throws up. And Astex has been working on those this year and will continue to look at those next year. So actually meeting with new types of companies that are doing new types of things, which we hadn't thought about in terms of, you know, potential alliances, how we can work with them to actually improve things going forward. And that's always exciting and continues to be exciting. So I think there's a bit of a balance, you know, with the pros and the cons. I think it will be a bit of a mixed bag, but we have to hold on to the fact that we will get through it eventually, and there will be lots of new opportunities to do good collaborations that we haven't really even thought of yet. So I'm optimistic.
Good. It's what we need, I think, at this time of year. Roll, and then to Michael, if you could do a quick summary of what you're expecting.
Very quick. I think we're going to have another stellar year next year, so no concerns there. My only concern, and that has been around for a while, is again the public perception of our sector. And I think we've been given an opportunity this year to be part of the public debate, and I think we've handled that generally quite well. And I hope we can continue that. I hope we can continue to be seen as a constructive sector, as a sector that really benefits the larger population. So I hope we can keep that up.
Michael.
Yeah, I mean, with the caveat that, you know, we have naturally sort of concerns about the pricing of deals. It's certainly outweighed by the excitement about how much capital and inventiveness and creativity and contribution the industry's been able to make. And so I think we're really excited about what comes next, and we're going to keep doing what we're doing. Very excited about the year that we've had. And
finally, Teresa, your closing thoughts.
I think I agree with everyone here. You know, I think we do have an opportunity, as Roel mentioned, in terms of demonstrating the value of the sector to the sort of the broader population and broader economy. And I do think it will continue as long as sort of exhaustion from, you know, a full year of this, people manage to work through that, right? Hopefully over the next few weeks. But, you know, I think we'll be in this sort of mode for another, you know, 7-8 months, and hopefully coming out of that after that point, and you know, people be hopefully raring to go. I think learning a lot from this experience, yeah, I'm excited for the next year.
Thank you. It's great to see the optimism and actually the excitement for next year. And I think the industry has achieved so much in 2020 as well that there's a reason to be optimistic. Thank you guys for a great discussion. I'm going to hand back now to Alicia, that's going to wrap us up for this session. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Lucie.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucie and panelists. That was a fantastic discussion, highlighting some really key themes there. So looking at the types and opportunities of deals and investments, how technology and skills are interplaying into that, and then looking at what's coming out, themes of sustainability, competition in the market, pricing, and new therapy areas. So really engaging, thank you. Coming up, we have another half-hour networking session. Please use this as an opportunity to make those serendipitous meetings. We're all missing so much. And the next session will begin at 4 p.m. and it's a live debate on converging science and technology. So with that, I wish everyone a very successful conference and look forward to engaging with you online. Thank you.